All right, and welcome to this episode of Hammering Down. And I am being joined by an up and coming broadcaster. I say up and coming. He's well established and is quickly becoming the voice of Birmingham. And this is Mr. Blake Gardner. He is one of the guys that runs her broadcast for the Legion. He also does Samford football and I think baseball as well. So he is quickly taking over the Birmingham airways, and I'm having him on to talk about his broadcasting career and also talk about the upcoming Memphis FC match. How you doing, Blake?
Good, man. Appreciate you having me.
Well, so just to make this clear, so you do all pretty much all the Sanford sports, and you're a Sanford grad, correct?
Yeah, graduated from Samford in 2016.
What was it always the goal to do broadcasting? Is that what you went to school for?
Honestly, no. I mean, I went to Samford and majored in finance of all things. I was in their sports marketing program because I knew I wanted to be around sports and work in sports, and I figured um, going to business school and like getting some type of analytical background for me that was finance was going to be a good way to kind of get into that with the explosion of analytics across all sports. I mean, I'm a baseball fan, so obviously baseball is pretty well known for the deep, deep analytic stuff. But I mean, every sport's kind of trending that way now. So I wanted that kind of analytical background, but also get into that sports marketing program to kind of have that connection to sports. And then really freshman, sophomore year, I kind of got involved just interning with Sanford's athletic departments, started volunteering with some of their video broadcasts when it was still very new, producing some of their radio broadcasts, and eventually they gave me a little try on air, and they were like, hey, you're not bad at this, we're going to keep giving you different stuff to do. And so I did some football sideline reporting for their radio broadcast. I did some baseball on the radio, and just kind of kept growing and growing and trying different things and adding new stuff to the portfolio. And yeah, now I call Sanford baseball. I do a lot of their football. I do all their volleyball. And now I've started to do a little bit of UAB men's and women's basketball too, all for ESPN3, ESPN Plus, in addition to what we're talking about right now, Birmingham Legion FC, which this is my, I guess, third year calling Birmingham Legion soccer, which has been a blast.
Yeah, you have been awesome to listen to. Very you're very informative, and it's very clear whenever anybody listens to you is that you do your homework. There's a lot of other broadcasters that we've heard, team broadcasters, and it's like these guys have no clue what they're talking about. But I've never felt that way with you, which is very impressive, especially since you do so many sports. I know it takes forever to do all that research on everybody. And it's kind of funny that you mentioned the whole analytics thing. This is totally not soccer related, but I spend probably hours and hours a day just looking at Baseball Savant and Baseball Reference because all those nerdy little stats. It's like, oh yeah, this guy is really good at baseball. Like Mike Trout can smash the ball. But was he doing different than everybody else? Dude has an elite bat speed. He just swings the bat faster than everybody else. And I just think that's so cool that they're able to track that. And I'm so glad that that kind of analytics is starting to get into soccer because now I can nerd out even more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Baseball Savant, Fangraphs, Baseball Ref, as you said, those are all close to the homepage for me. And I've really actually, I really like what American Soccer Analysis is doing right now. They're kind of building out their USL coverage a little bit more. And so it's not very useful early in the year, but you can definitely tell like going on throughout the year, seeing some of the expected goal numbers and chances created from a bit more of an analytical perspective, I think is going to be fruitful. And if it only supplies me and Mike maybe one or two nuggets per broadcast, I mean, I think that's helpful and informative to the viewer. I mean, because at the end of the day, you're trying to bring the viewer maybe something they didn't know or add a little bit something to the broadcast that they wouldn't necessarily know if they're watching it with no sound. Because I mean, if you're not going to add information, then you might as well not be talking at all. So just little nuggets like that that I can pick up and incorporate and add to a broadcast. I'm always looking for those.
Yeah, those guys, and also John at USL Tactics, who
Yeah,
he recently got picked up by Tampa Bay Rowdies, which is awesome for him. He's just a fantastic guy. But I will spend hours just looking at that content, even stuff that It's like, oh, those guys did that against Legion, but look at these numbers. They're kind of cool, though. You know,
Yeah.
just the
Yeah, no,
way.
I mean I'm a subscriber to the pod, so I listened to that one before the Indy match, and he does some really good stuff. I'm very interested to see how he does with his, I guess it's an internship with Tampa Bay this year. But he was actually a guy I was going to bring up later because we were talking about Memphis. I know he's a big Dre Fortune fan, and he's one of the latest additions for Memphis 901, who I would assume is going to be in the starting 11 this weekend for Memphis. So I will no doubt be using some of John's numbers when talking about Dre this weekend.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and jump into that. So you just mentioned Dre Fortune, who is the new signing for Memphis 901, which I'm surprised it took him this long to get signed to a USL team because he was easily one of the best players for that North Carolina side. I would guess he was just trying to find something a little closer to home to North Carolina, or maybe he just wasn't getting offers, which I think is just purely insane because the dude's nuts. Is there any other player besides like a guy like Lamar who is just world renowned for just being fantastic, just a top quality player? Is there any other player that you've done a little bit scouting on that you're like, this guy is probably going to make a difference?
Um, and as far as returning guys from Memphis, Mark Segberg sticks out. A guy that played a lot for them last year, played a lot for them the year before. I think he's probably been one of their best signings that they had, at least at the initial start of their USL championship run, which was back in 2019. I thought Segber's looked really good. The few times that we saw him last year. Um, Obviously, Dre Fortune. I mean, we didn't see him with Memphis. We saw him with North Carolina, but I mean, that guy torched Birmingham. It felt like last year. I think he scored 3 times last year in the 4 games that Birmingham saw North Carolina FC. The one guy that I want to see, I'm assuming he's going to feature in the starting 11 as well, is Dominic Oduro because he was a guy that played quite a bit for Tampa Bay Rowdies there in his stretch, but last year kind of fell out of favor and fell out of form and didn't really feature heavily down the stretch of Tampa season and into the postseason. So I can understand why he wanted to move on and go somewhere where maybe he's going to get a little bit more consistent minutes. And Memphis definitely had some holes they needed to fill in the midfield. So I think Oduro could be an interesting piece to kind of watch this weekend and see how he kind of settles into what Memphis is going to try to do this year.
A guy that I'm keeping my eye on that we haven't seen him with Memphis since 2019, and that was Rashawn Dally, who he was their striker, and he never really did anything against Legion, didn't really score too much against us, but against pretty much everybody else in the USL. He didn't always score, but he was always just in fantastic positions. His positioning was solid, and dude just didn't quit. He's one of the, I believe, 3 guys that are on the team that are former FC Cincinnati guys, which is kind
Yeah.
of cool. And there's Kadima Dakris. He is also a former FC Cincinnati guy, which I think every Cincinnati fan would tell you that he was one of the most underrated players on the squads whenever he was there. So I'm very interested to see how they would fit Dakris in too, especially since they gave him the number 10. So I'm assuming he's going to be starting.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be some interesting things to watch, at least up front. We talked a little bit about defensive midfielders, but up front for Memphis, I think it's going to come down to, I mean, who's going to score for these guys, right? Because, I mean, they scored a bunch down the stretch last year when Ben Pyramid took over after Tim Mulgreen was let go down the stretch. But, I mean, I don't think that was necessarily just a huge tactical change there for Pyramid and his staff. I think that was just Cal Jennings put the team on my back and go score as much as I can. I mean, Jennings had a monster finish to that campaign last year. So, I mean, they brought in, as you said, Dakers. They brought in Kyle Murphy, another former Tampa Bay Rowdy, who's given the number 9 shirt. So you got to assume he's going to feature pretty heavily as well. But yeah, where is Memphis going to find consistent offense? I think that's going to be a big question for those guys because I mean they're going to need. They're no doubt about it. They're going to need offense given the teams that they're going to see in the Central Division. When you're talking about Birmingham, Indy, Louisville City, teams that are going to score a bunch of goals. It feels like.
Yeah, to me, I think the place that they're going to have consistency in the offense is going to be with Roland Lamar, who I think he's an Ivory Coast guy and was a Belgian, whichever one, international.
Yeah.
However, whatever their country, I think it's Belgian, but
Yep.
he was an international for them. He's played pretty much everywhere around the world, and then went from the Belgian first tier, then he went to MLS and was just a consistent guy for FC Dallas, and then was one of the most underrated players for that FC Cincinnati squad, which was just bad. Um, but the thing that's interesting about the Lamar signing is that one or two things. Either A, Lamar took a massive pay cut just to play professional soccer again, or they are paying him a lot of money, which is fine, but he's an older player now. He's in his mid 30s, and I don't know if they are spending that much money, where do they have to cut? Where did they cut their corners from? And I guess it's kind of hard to say because we haven't seen this team play at all yet. They're one that, I think they're the only team in our division that haven't played yet.
Mhm.
So we have no idea. We have no idea if that was a worthwhile investment.
Yeah, I mean, as a broadcaster, I hate that they haven't played yet because that, as a broadcaster, you always want to go back and watch old tape and see where guys are playing, see who you think is going to be featured and who you might be able to focus on a little bit more. So the fact that we don't have any tape on this version of the Memphis team kind of sucks in terms of previewing them and getting ready. But if anything, it almost forces you to kind of get to know the whole roster, which I mean, I think Memphis has, I think 18 guys officially announced on the roster. I think they're going to add one or two more officially by the end of the week. But yeah, at least at the beginning, it doesn't feel like there's a ton of depth on this 901 FC side. We'll see how that changes. Of course, I'm sure there might be some loan agreements coming on the horizon or one or two more signings. But Lamont's going to be an interesting piece too. I mean, an older guy on a team that doesn't feature a ton of older faces, and a guy with not a whole lot of experience in the USL. So I'm not sure how familiar everybody else is with him, which makes prep for this Memphis team interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be tuning into this Saturday's game just to kind of get a sense of what Memphis is going to be about this year. Because you're right, they are one of the mysteries in the sense that we haven't seen or heard much from them, and won't really until this Saturday.
Yeah, something I don't know if this is going to mean anything at all, but we have Fanuel Kavita, which Legion have moved into this weird, not weird, but it's different, where we have center backs that like to make overlapping runs, who like to really push up, which I've shared my discontent for the putting two center backs in the box and putting your left back in the, just outside the box on corners. I didn't understand that move, but that's neither here nor there. But a guy like Fanuel Kavita, who has played who knows how long with John Berner, because Berner was the backup keeper at St. Louis, do you think
Mhm.
there's a lot of scouting going on from Fanuel, who's telling him, he was like, listen, when I played with this guy, good dude, but can't make saves to his left or can't make saves to his right or something of the sort, or is that something that maybe doesn't happen as much?
No, I mean I think it does. I mean I think there's we've talked about some faces that maybe haven't played in USL as much for the guys that have. I mean that's what the later part of this week's going to be about. Like, who knows what this guy does? Let's go pull tape on him. Let's see if we can find what this guy does well, what maybe he does do well. And no doubt, yeah, if Kavita knows anything about Burner, then he's gonna let the team know about it because I mean, guys talk and guys watch tape and guys have played with a bunch of guys. It's one of the more unique things about the USL in the sense that it is very incestuous, right? Like guys bounce from team to team, and you get frequently matched up with certain teams. I know when we were talking to Martin Rennie with Indy back before the season started, he was mentioning how he hadn't watched a bunch of Birmingham tape until leading up to that game because he didn't see Birmingham at all last year. But he was very familiar with Fonwell Kavita because they saw St. Louis a bunch. And so he's like, well, I can kind of guess what he's going to be about. Now it's just how does he fit tactically with what Birmingham's trying to do this year? And I think so far, at least as far as Fonwell Kavita goes, he's fit very, very well. I thought he and Ofemu were an excellent pairing against Louisville City, really there for outside of the first 2 or 3 minutes after the set piece. They were really, really good. And assuming Crognali's not healthy enough to go again this week, I think that's going to be the pairing against Memphis as well.
I kind of, on one hand, I'm so happy we have Ben because he looked outstanding. He had that one
for
weird
sure.
play at the end of or in the middle of the second half where almost cost us a goal. But other than that, I think he played just about a perfect match. And it really kind of sucks in a way because I think a guy like Jake Roof is just so solid. He is a fantastic player, which we did get to see him a little bit whenever Johnny Dean ended up moving more into the midfield and they just kind of put Jake back and let him stay in the back line. But it kind of sucks because for the first time in a long time, maybe ever, we have depth in our back line, which last year, I said this before, but Bolu Akinyode, he's a fantastic player. He's one of the best football players or soccer players, whichever you prefer, one of the best that I've ever seen come through the USL. But he's not a natural center back, so
Sure.
he's a fantastic talent and he filled the role well. But having depth with natural center backs just makes all the difference.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and what was it the year before that? Zach Arivo was a guy that ended up having to play a lot of center back, which I mean, Zach does a lot of things well, but like Bolu is not necessarily a natural center back. Mikey Lopez, not necessarily a natural fullback, but he did pretty admirably there last year. I think he's really excited to get more touches in midfield this year. But yeah, I mean, you're right. That depth is huge. And it was funny. We talked so much about that depth leading up to the year, at least with some of the Legion staff and players. And then we're talking to Coach Sohn before the Louisville City game. And we're like, man, thank goodness for this depth because now you're without Alex, you're without JJ, you don't have Junior yet. And you end up losing Mikey in that match. You end up losing Kasim, who doesn't make it the full 90, and now that depth really gets tested. So I mean, it looked good on paper, and you're like, man, it's going to be tough if some of these guys can't play. And then all of a sudden, you've got almost everybody kind of pressed into action. So I think that depth is going to be big this year for Birmingham in terms of being able to maybe sustain those injuries and those spells where maybe they don't have guys at 100%, unlike in years past.
So let's pivot a little bit and let's talk about probably the biggest storyline coming into this, and that is the change of venue, Legion at Legion, which I think is an awesome thing that they're doing. You know, with free tickets for anybody that gets their COVID vaccine there, $5 tickets for everybody else, which you really can't beat that. There, first off, have you seen where you're going to be calling the game from yet? And is it about a million miles away or what?
Yes, and also yes. Yeah, I mean it's up there. If you've ever been to Legion Field and seen the press box, I mean you're pretty far up there, which is certainly going to be an adjustment, no doubt. One of the nice things about BBVA Field is, I mean, you've got a great view of the pitch there. You're not too far up, but you're far enough up to give you some perspective and kind of give you a chance to see the full field end to end. So Legion, you're definitely going to see the field end to end. It's just going to be a matter of making sure you can kind of grasp where everything is, given that you're so far up. But I think the players are going to be really excited about the overall surface. I mean, playing on turf isn't always preferable, but playing on turf is better than playing on sand, which is what they played on against Indy 11. And then Louisville City, I mean, that surface was pretty good. It was just a little wet because I mean it was drizzling really about an hour till kickoff, and then even as kickoff came and went, it was still drizzling. So it looks like it's going to be sunny skies, which is going to be great. And the turf may be a little bit bouncy and maybe a little bit hard, but I think as long as it's smooth, I think the Birmingham attack is going to much prefer that because I mean this is an athletic team. They're going to want to move the ball. They're going to want to play fast. So as long as the turf plays true enough, I think they're going to be much happier about that. And yeah, like you said, I mean, $5 to come watch a pro soccer game, like it's an awesome value. It's kind of a one-off match, and it's with a great cause with getting people vaccinated and trying to improve the vaccination numbers in the Birmingham community. So I think from that perspective, it could be a really fun time. And of course, it's going to be a really big match against Memphis. So come out and see a 3 points performance.
Hope so. Something that you kind of mentioned, which I think is very, very interesting. Really, I think this may be a weird statement, but this team almost seems built for a turf field. And I know that seems strange, but you mentioned just how high the ball bounces, just how crazy the field's going to play. How many players do we have on the team that are taller than 6'2"? If that ball is bouncing higher, if the one player lets the ball bounce, You have a J.J. Williams. You have an Alex Cernali, who is one of the tallest humans I've ever seen. You have Benafimu. You have Fanuel Kavita. You have guys that are so freaking tall and they can jump. That I just think that something like that just really has to play to the Legion's advantage, right?
Yeah, well, and I think if there's one advantage of turf, and you kind of see it a little bit with some of the teams that play on turf pretty regularly in MLS, is that the guys that are fast and have pace love turf because you can get a little bit more burn. Uh, like Seattle usually always has a speed burner or two. Atlanta, when they're right, not necessarily under DeBoer, but they're kind of trending back that way. They usually have some pacey guys who can get after some guys. So the guys with pace, especially on the wings, seem to prefer turf because they can get up and down, and maybe the ball bounces around a little bit more. But if you're the team that's pressing and applying pressure, you're kind of okay with that because it may force a giveaway or two, or maybe a mishandled pass here and there. So yeah, I think the pace is the biggest piece of the turf, and I mean Legion has plenty of that. They're going to get Junior Flemings back this week. Johnny Dean's a guy who I expect is going to get more involved in the attack as the season goes along. So I think for guys like that, this could be a nice day for them.
I was just going to say, this just seems like a match that Johnny Dean might have 5 assists in. If, especially with just how fast he is. And this is nothing, like, I'm not saying that in the sense of Memphis is bad, which, believe me, I want to say that as much as anybody else, but we haven't seen them yet, so I don't know that. But with just how fast he is, I've talked to so many people around the league, and I'll tell them, be like, listen, you do not understand just how fast Johnny Dean is. I mean, I genuinely believe that he is the fastest player in the USL. Dude is wicked fast, and he's just that fast all 90 minutes. They start really wearing down that defense. He's going to get behind some guys that normally wouldn't, just because they're going to be on turf.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you saw a little bit more of the attacking minded Johnny Dean last week against Louisville City. At least when Legion was playing at full health and still had Kasim and Mikey on the field, because you started to see Dean make those overlapping runs with Cervania on that flank, and you saw Ryan James start to get into the attack, and you saw guys start to kind of run the channels down the wings, and you could definitely tell that, okay, if I can play the ball on the floor, then we've got guys who can run into space and make stuff happen. So yeah, I think this could be a very nice time for him to serve in some good balls, and yeah, maybe pick up an assist or two.
This team, I know we're talking a lot about Legion, but really there's just not a lot to say about Memphis because we just don't know. I wanted to try to call similar opponents in the sense of, granted, we don't know what the scoreline was for the Legion match, but they played Peachtree SEMA, I'm pretty sure, or SEMA Peachtree, one of the two, which is a USL League Two side. The only reason we know that is because of photos from the match. But so we assume that they did pretty well against them. And Memphis just played Little Rock Rangers and beat them 5-0. And
Yep.
how do we compare a 5-0 win against them to a 4-1 win against Chattanooga Red Wolves? How does that compare? I don't know if it does, but it kind of does because they're both lower league teams. But I don't know. It's just this Memphis squad. I try to do research, and there's just nothing. You even the thing that's really funny about this Memphis squad is I tried to look up a lot of tape on individual players, but a lot of these guys were not starters on their old team. They came to Memphis because they want to get starting time. So this obviously Coach Sohn and Jay Heaps and the whole coaching staff, knows where to find all this stuff, and they have a lot bigger interest in knowing the film than I do. But it was still hard, which is what makes this even a bigger mystery.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I know you have, I guess, from a tactical perspective, you have about 3 or 4 games worth of Ben Pierman and what he tried to do down the stretch of last season. I mean, Memphis put out some good results under him over the last 3 or 4 games, including that 3-1 win where I think Jennings had a hat trick on the
Yeah.
on the final day of 2020. And I mean, you could kind of see a similar tactical vein from all three of those games, right? Like they sat pretty deep, and they countered through Jennings, and hopefully he would get a run of support here or two. But I mean, they didn't try to control much of the ball, and part of that was they played at home at AutoZone, which is it's a small pitch, a small park, and so they have a little bit less space to cover when they kind of hunker down. Legion Field is going to be a little bit bigger, maybe not as big as BBVA, but it'll be a little bit bigger, so a little bit more ground to cover. But if I had to guess, at least from a tactical perspective, I would imagine Memphis is going to come out and play a similar style. They're gonna try to make Birmingham break them down, and see if they can keep the scoring to a minimum. Which, I mean, I think Birmingham's going to be okay with. They're going to be okay with kind of controlling the tempo, controlling the pace. And if anything, hopefully it allows Birmingham to maybe press a little bit higher up the pitch, which is something they had a lot of success with, off and on last week against Louisville.
Yeah, just something about just breaking down a team. And I think Legion's a really good team to be able to do that because you have guys like a Junior Flemings who I don't know if he's going to be starting, but I'm assuming he's going to get some kind of minutes against this Memphis squad. And then you have a guy like Anderson Asiadu, you have a guy like Bruno Lapa, who, when they have the ball at their feet, you're not getting it off of them. You're really just hoping they make a bad pass or take a bad shot just to dispossess them because you're not going to when the ball is at their feet. And that's really going to wear down a side like Memphis if they're planning to do the hunker down and counterattack, which is kind of, if I remember right, maybe I did the wrong research, but their coach used to be at Detroit City, which is what we used to see a lot out of that team is hunker down, counterattack, and they had a lot of success doing that. So, I mean, this seems like the wrong team to try to do that kind of system against, but also last year it worked perfectly fine. They just don't have a Cal Jennings anymore.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at times last year, I think Birmingham self-admittedly said they could have been better at breaking down teams that kind of sat in. North Carolina had a lot of success at times, especially in the two matches. I think last year that North Carolina came to Birmingham down the stretch, they kind of sat in and countered. Memphis did the same thing, and so I feel like that's probably been an emphasis for this Legion team in 2021. Is we've got to be able against teams that are going to sit back like that. We've got to be able to break down teams, and then we've got to be able to apply pressure and force some giveaways and some bad spots. And I mean, they've got enough attacking power now that they can ideally make some of those guys pay. And I mean, if Anderson Asiadu is going to play like the way he did last week at the back and clean up a ton of mistakes, then I mean, you're going to be in great shape. Because I mean, that guy was a machine last week, and that was probably one of the best games I've seen him play, in a Legion uniform.
This whole year that we've seen Anderson has just been insane because Louisville, he played very, very well, was easily the man to match. But he was no slouch against Indy. He was probably one of the few bright spots against Indy that we saw. Against Atlanta United, we really saw him play really, really well. He has to be probably one of the most improved players in all of the USL because just seeing his growth from last year to this year already is just nuts.
Yeah, I mean, he's turned in two really, really good shifts. And I think having Mikey next to him has helped a lot because it's allowed Anderson to maybe have a bit more of a defined role where he can sink back in between the center backs, connect passes, but also can kind of be the destroyer at the end while Mikey goes up and kind of roams more into the attack. And I'm not sure whether Mikey's fully fit for this one or not. If it's not Mikey, I'd probably assume we'll see Eli Cronali, who's kind of in a similar vein, more of an attack-minded guy who can push forward. But yeah, I mean, Anderson's been a linchpin at the back, and he has been really, really solid. So I think, even though Legion maybe have only scored once in the 2 weekends they've had so far, I think they can take some solace in the fact that Anderson's been good, and for the most part, their back line's been really good as well.
I I'm really glad that you're as professional as you are because for me, if I was an announcer and I just saw Anderson just bulldoze another human like he likes to do regularly, I would be like full Vince McMahon in SmackDown or something. Like I would be going nuts the whole time. How do you stop yourself from just doing that?
I mean, it's more fun. I will say it's more fun on away broadcast when we're just on My 68 just for Birmingham fans because it feels like we can be a little bit more enthusiastic about that. Like, oh man, Anderson wrecked another guy, sick. Whereas if we're on ESPN Plus and we're the home team broadcast, we have to be a little bit more cognizant of the fact that we probably should be a little bit more 50-50. And I mean, that doesn't preclude us from like saying, wow, Anderson Isiadu is playing a whale of a game or Bruno Lopez is doing the same. But I think it's a little bit more fun when we're just doing it for the Birmingham fans locally here on TV, where we can kind of highlight more of the performances that we see, on the Birmingham side of things, which is what Mike and I tried to do against Louisville City. Because I mean, that was a nervy, gosh, half hour plus a dozen minutes, which I've never seen before. So being able to kind of celebrate some of the performances we saw in that match, like Benefemu stepping up and being able to talk more about that and talk more about guys who played big matches is certainly an advantage of just doing a broadcast for the Legion fans.
So I've asked this to a lot of players, but I've never asked an announcer this before. Um, how much do you feed off the crowd? I mean, whenever you hear the crowd really get going, whether it's a bad call and everything's starting to get really chaotic, or just good vibes going on in the supporter section, how much do you guys feed off that?
God, we love it. Broadcasters love the crowd because it gives you that feeling that you're involved in the game, and it feels like you're down on the field instead of being in the press box. So having that kind of energy to feed off of feeds my enthusiasm. It feeds my calls. It feeds my excitement for when guys score. And honestly, that was one of the tough parts of last year. Not necessarily at home, because at least there was a little bit of a crowd for at least the Legion home matches. Not as many people as you'd like, but just enough to kind of give you that sense. But I remember, I think it was Legion's first road match last year. They went to Charleston, who didn't have anybody in the stands, and just hearing like absolute like silence basically in your ears as you're calling that game, it kind of makes you generate your own energy. And so you're just like, man, like this just kind of feels dead. Like, I don't know, am I sounding too excited? Like, am I not sounding excited enough? It just makes it hard to kind of place your voice and make sure you're trying to match the tempo and the highs and lows of the match, which is what you're always trying to do. So having the crowd as background to kind of inform your inflection and your energy and your excitement is always super helpful. The one thing about not having crowds that's kind of nice from a broadcaster's perspective is you hear all the coaches and all the players. And even still at Louisville last week, we heard a lot
Coach
of the Legion
Stone.
bench. Yeah, you heard a lot of Stone. You heard a lot of Cano Smith, which was super funny hearing Cano. I haven't seen him yet this week. I got to give him grief about because he heard, I guess, that we were going to get a dozen minutes of stoppage before we heard or saw it. And so Mike and I were talking about something, ball went out of play, and all of a sudden, Kano, we hear in our ears from the crowd mic, like, I've never seen that in my life. And we're like, what does he see? Does he see something we're not seeing? And then we see the board with 12 minutes, like, oh, that's what he was reacting to. That's hilarious. But also, yeah, I agree, Kano. I've never seen anything like that in my life either. So, and I think like last year at a North Carolina match, like there was a hot mic that caught Coach Zone on the touchline after a red card. Like, I love hearing that kind of audio, that like intense audio from down below, which you don't necessarily get with a full crowd. But yeah, give me crowd noise 100 times out of 100 because it's so helpful to a broadcaster in terms of just inflection and energy. And I feel like just being able to call a better game. And it sounds better. And I think it just helps. It helps the viewer in so many ways, just having that type of energy behind it.
One of the cool moments, you kind of mentioned the hot mic, which I don't know how it'd work, and coaches would probably 100% hate it, but I want hot mics on the coaches at all times because I think it's one of the coolest things, like those mic'd up things that they do
Yeah.
on the NFL Network, which I know they just take the highlights, but hearing some of those things and then seeing it happen. For example, I think it was late into the match, maybe 80th, maybe well into the 90th, whatever it was. Johnny Dean made a run up the right side, and you hear Kano hear him yell something along the lines of, Bruno, make the run. And you just see Bruno run up the right side, and Johnny lays it off to Bruno, and it immediately creates a chance. And that was something cool where you hear him say it, you see it happen, and it's like, oh, that's what the coaches are doing.
Yeah.
Because you kind of remember like playing like as a 12-year-old and you hear your coaches yelling at you and you're like, okay, man, I see the ball, I'm gonna go get it, like, I guess. But here, seeing professionals do it and then just respond immediately and knowing where to go and doing all that kind of stuff, that was one of the coolest moments of the night for me.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I kind of enjoyed too. You kind of get that tactical insight that maybe you don't necessarily get when there's a full crowd, because that kind of get drowns out, and maybe Coaches are less prone to yell across the park if they know they're not going to get heard. They're going to try to relay it to somebody else, which isn't as fun because we don't get to see it. But yeah, I mean, I'd be totally in favor of that. Having a coach or two wear a mic, and then maybe in post match, maybe like a day or two later, you could kind of edit together some clips of him saying something, and you can see the adjustment happening in front of you. I think that stuff is super important for fans to kind of get a glimpse of what's actually happening tactically in games, the kind of chess pieces that are being moved throughout the 90 minutes.
So this is kind of a flip of script, kind of pivoting away. I don't remember if we talked about this before the recording or at the very beginning of the recording, but you mentioned that you were a finance major, and now you're doing your broadcasting thing. Do you know? I'm sure you do. That pretty much you and Jay Heaps are basically the same human, I guess, because he was a finance guy at Duke, and then went on to be a broadcaster, which gave him more of an insight of the tactical stuff. So basically, what I'm getting at is, are you going to be becoming a head coach soon, or what?
Yeah, I don't think I have the tactical knowledge to be a head coach, unfortunately. I grew up playing a bunch of baseball and basketball, which means I didn't play a ton of soccer. So having someone like Mike next to me who has been at the highest levels of college soccer and seen all the ins and outs, and being able to talk to Tommy Sohn and Kano on a week to week basis and kind of get their insights on what they're seeing in training, and what they think is coming up for the match. Having those guys to kind of lean on, I think has been super important for me, because I can kind of digest a little bit more of what's happening in front of me, and hopefully add like an insight or a nugget or two to the match as things go along. Because I mean, that's the kind of inside stuff that the viewers kind of need to see and hear, and kind of understand what's happening as it's happening. So yeah, I'm definitely not going to be coaching. But if I'm doing anything like Jay Heaps, and I feel like I'm doing something well, because he was a heck of an athlete, and he's doing a great job running the organization at this point.
I didn't know until I did research on him that he was a scholarship basketball player at Duke, which I think is one of the craziest things ever.
It
Because
is. It
I,
is. And I mean, I asked him a little bit about, you talked about his broadcasting days. I mean, I talked to him a little bit about it. I think he really enjoyed it, because he is an analytical guy. And so I think that role fits him well. But um, I think his downfall was, or not his downfall, but I think the thing that frustrated him the most about it was, I mean, you are living and dying with like every pass, every touch, as someone who's like deeply invested. And sometimes you kind of got to turn a little bit of that down for 90 minutes so you can kind of call a match, and let your emotion kind of flow with the match one way or the other, whichever it goes. But if you're a fan, if you're also like trying to be a fan while also calling the match, it's hard. It's hard because you do get so invested in, oh my God, that was an awful call. What is this referee doing? He's been so one-sided all night. And like, and maybe he has been, but at a certain point you just kind of sound like sour grapes. And anytime I hear a broadcast get too one-sided, I just kind of cringe as a broadcaster, because you're like, oh man, this doesn't sound good. So yeah, there's a certain art to it. And I'm sure Jay would be really good if he ever wanted to jump back in the booth again.
Man, that'd be kind of cool. Just one good time have you, Mike, and Jay for maybe like 15 minutes in the first half, and be like, "Here you go, Jay. What are you seeing? What are you seeing that we're not, or something along the lines." I think that'd be so cool.
Yeah, I'll pitch it to him. I'll see what he says.
That'd be just must listen to TV. That would just become absolutely iconic, absolutely fantastic. Another kind of, you said something and it kind of jogged my memory vaguely. Um, Something that's kind of interesting with this team is that Coach Sohm, as I'm sure you know, started off his professional career as an indoor guy. He wasn't an outdoor soccer player. Obviously in college or in, you know, high school days, he played outdoor. But his professional career started off as an indoor guy. How do you, that kind of playing surface is pretty similar to the turf, and you kind of see that hints of that indoor style with the Legion squad, with just the quick 1-2 passes, just run as fast as you can to get to the other side of the pitch. Do you think he's going to be able to dig more into that indoor knowledge and say, let's do this outdoor now?
I don't know if it'll necessarily be pulling from indoor knowledge, but I think I would. That's a good question to ask him to see how much of that influenced the way that he likes his teams to play. Because you're right, like a lot of what Steph preaches on a day in day out is 1-2 touch, quick passing, move the ball from side to side, which is super important in a smaller indoor confined space, but can be super effective as well when you've got a bunch of space to work with on a very spacious pitch. So I'm not sure if he took some of the. I'm sure he took some of those pointers and tips and tricks from that indoor career. But I mean, he's a guy that's been around soccer in the States for so long that I mean, I'm sure he would tell you that he's picked up tactical stuff and training stuff from a ton of different coaches, just having exposure to so many different organizations and so many really good American soccer minds that I'm sure he's pulled from a lot of different places at this point.
This front office that we have with Coach Stone, with Jay Heaps, with Kano, with everybody else who's up there. Obviously, Morgan's doing great things up there as well with the business side. It just, especially after I talk to a lot of players who have a lot of experience, I ask them, like, what's the locker room like? And a lot of them just say this is one of the most professional groups I've ever been around. Like this group is just insanely in tune with what's going on. They run everything so professionally. They are treating the Legion like they are MLS plus and not just a quote unquote just a USL team. Is that kind of the experience you've gotten as a broadcaster?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think this is a front office as a whole that came into the league and really wanted to get a reputation out there quickly that they were going to do everything the right way. And I think that they understood correctly that the easiest way to attract the kind of talent that they wanted to bring to the team was to be that type of first class top grade organization. That's how you attract guys like Nico Brett, like Junior Flemings, like Fonwell Kavita. Those type of guys come in because they see that kind of commitment from ownership on down, to be a really good club, to be a professional club, to be extremely well run and organized. All the little things that it takes to be an excellent USL Championship side from top to bottom, from operations to the business side of things. All the little stuff matters because I mean the players see all of that. They talk. We talked about it earlier. A lot of these guys know each other, so they talk about on the field stuff. They talk about off the field stuff, and guys that come into Birmingham to play the Legion see the kind of atmosphere that's been cultivated, and see the facilities, and see all that kind of stuff. Even if they don't talk directly to the players. So yeah, I think the Legion front office has done a great job kind of cementing themselves as a top class organization, and I think that's going to help them both on and off the field as they continue to kind of grow and expand over the next few years.
So we're just going to go ahead and wrap this up. Unfortunately, your camera is frozen, and this is an unfortunate freeze. I'm just going to let you know, man. That's it's very unfortunate, but
Oh no! Let's
uh,
see.
maybe.
See
I,
if we can see if I can get myself unfrozen. At
I
least
didn't
the
want.
audio didn't freeze. That's the important part.
Ah, there you are. I didn't want to stop you because you were on a roll, man. But I was like, oh man, this is unfortunate. But obviously, I'm not going to ask you to give a score prediction because you're going to be calling the match. But what are you looking for? How do you think both matches or both sides are going to translate to each other, especially on a different atmosphere? And what are you looking for from the fans seeing a brand new venue for the first time at Legion Field?
I think it'll be unique for the fans. I think the tough part about Legion Field is, I mean, it is so cavernous, so it's so hard to fill. So, I mean, it's going to be different than the intimate atmosphere that everyone's kind of used to at BBVA, which is a bit unfortunate, but I think as a one-off, it's going to be really fun because I think it's just going to be something different. It's going to feel different. It's going to feel special. And I think the players are going to kind of feel that they're going to feel playing in a different venue. And even if Legion Field maybe isn't what it once was, it's still like a very like important institution here in Birmingham, and it still carries some weight, some history. And I think the guys are going to be excited about the chance just this once to play in a venue like that. I hope that Birmingham comes out pretty aggressively on Saturday against Memphis, tries to put them under a bit of pressure, see kind of what they're made of in the first quarter hour or so, especially considering Memphis hasn't played a game yet this year and is still trying to figure out integrating some of the new pieces that they've brought in over the past couple of weeks. So good time to kind of put them under pressure, see if you can't force them into an early giveaway, a big mistake early on. And I think it's going to be important for Memphis to try to weather that early pressure. I think the first 15 to 30 minutes are going to be huge for Memphis. If they can hold a level score line or even jump out in front, I think that's going to be huge for their confidence. I think if Birmingham kind of jumps on them early, like we saw once or twice last year, I think Birmingham could get out and run a little bit and please the home crowd. So no secret about it. I'm hoping for 3 points from Birmingham. They're overdue at this point for a solid, strong 3-point performance. But as a broadcaster, I'm hoping for a really fun game and a really exciting atmosphere. So I hope we get both of those things.
Well, Blake, you did awesome, man. This was a really fun conversation, hearing about the Memphis team, hearing what a broadcaster thinks about during these kind of matches, and also just kind of hearing your story through it. So it's been really cool, man. And if I remember right, your Twitter is going to be underscore Blake Gardner, which everybody go follow him on Twitter, give him a little bit more clout that he honestly really deserves. So thank you, man, for coming on.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, man. And looking forward to a fun game this weekend.
For sure. See you then.
See you, man.